Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lucy Heath. I'm the Deputy News Editor at Inside Housing. I'm really pleased to welcome you today to this session in which we will attempt to answer the question, has the pandemic altered how social housing providers should define effective and responsive customer service? So the pandemic has obviously had a massive impact on how we live, how we work and how we communicate with each other. This is no more true than in the social housing sector. When the COVID pandemic first hit in March last year, the sector had to dramatically change and ramp up the customer service that it provided. So pretty much overnight, the sector's customers were told they had to stay in their homes. Many of these people were vulnerable and needed a lot of support and information from their landlords. At the same time, almost the entire social housing workforce had to start working from home, and this obviously created challenges around how social landlords could ensure they were fully there for their customers. And that's before even mentioning the fact that within the space of a few days, the government decided to shut down the housing market and prevent people from moving home, while also banning tradespeople from entering properties. So we're now more than a year and a half since the UK entered its first lockdown. And during that time, social landlords have learned a lot about how to effectively deliver customer service under these challenging circumstances. And I'm sure our panellists will speak a lot more about this today. But before I introduce them, I just wanted to quickly set the scene a little bit and touch on what I think are some of the major challenges and changes the sector is currently facing that I think will have a big impact on how customer service delivered over the next months and years. So firstly, as we have unfortunately been reminded this week, the pandemic is still very much ongoing. Hopefully there will not be another lockdown, but we know with new variants this could be possible, so landlords of course will need to be prepared for this eventuality. Along with the ongoing COVID crisis comes the cost of living crisis. So over the last couple of months, we have seen energy prices skyrocket, and the Bank of England has predicted that inflation will rise to 5% by next spring. This is happening against the backdrop of all the additional welfare measures that were put in place during the pandemic being rolled back. So the furlough scheme has now come to an end. The £20 uplift to universal credit also recently ended. So clearly there's a lot of good customer service work that social landlords can do here to support their tenants during this difficult period. Another consequence of COVID, as well as some other factors such as Brexit, is ongoing supply chain shortages. So we've seen a big shortage in labour in many construction products over the last year or so. And social landlords are reporting that this is having a big impact on their ability to effectively deliver repairs and maintenance work and work through the backlog that was built up during lockdown. Clearly, this is a huge customer service challenge for social landlords, and these challenges will need to be communicated effectively to tenants. Another major change facing the sector right now is the increase in regulation following the Social Housing White Paper. So a whole new wing of the regulator has been created that is going to be looking into consumer regulation, which means the regulator will now be investigating things like housing quality and tenant engagement. Plus, the Housing Ombudsman has grown and really ramped up its activity, which is mostly focused on investigating how landlords deal with complaints. And I mentioned this, I think this is really relevant for the discussion, as it means the customer service work you do is going to come under the microscope going forward. One final major change facing the social housing sector that I want to quickly highlight before I pass over to our panellists is the climate crisis. So over the next 30 years, social landlords are going to have to retrofit the vast majority of their homes to make sure they're zero carbon. This work can be very intrusive and is going to involve some difficult discussions with residents. It's therefore essential that good customer service is at the heart of this transition and that landlords work now to build up those trusted relationships. So these are some, not all, of the major changes facing the sector right now. And I think it's worth keeping those in mind as we talk today about how customer service is evolving in the sector. But without further ado, I'll introduce you now to our panellists who will really be driving the discussion today. So we have Jo Cosson, Chief Executive at the Institute of Customer Service, who will be giving us a general overview of trends in customer service and telling us how social housing compares to other sectors. We have Jackie Perry, Assistant Director of Communities and Customer Service at Muir Group, who will be telling us about how Muir has provided customer service during the pandemic. And finally, we'll be hearing from Gary Rosier-Taylor, VP of Sales in Europe, Middle East and Africa at Locals, and he will be sharing some insights and expertise that his organisation has gathered on this topic. So each of our panellists is going to speak for about 8 minutes, And there will be plenty of time for questions at the end. So please type all of your questions in the box as our panelists were speaking, and I'll put out as many as possible to them at the end. But now I'm going to pass on to our first speaker. So first up we have Joe, and Joe's going to tell us the experience from the Institute of Customer Service.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And it's fabulous to be with you all today. And as you said in your opening, Lizzie, I think it is, and my slide will actually show this, a particularly challenging time. And as many of you will know, the Institute does and undertakes something called the UK Customer Satisfaction Index. And July's results, I think, really reflected this, a really unusual and challenging year for customer service, or 18 months really. As we've been sharply reminded in the last few days, the crisis is certainly not over. And even without the latest news, the longer term impacts, I don't believe are really fully understood or apparent. And as they play out, both not just in terms of health and well-being, but also some of the financial impacts that are actually being seen across this. What has been interesting, and I think we should give a big shout out actually to the millions of customer facing staff that have literally kept the lights on, ensured that our customers are well serviced and served, and really, really cared about the outreach that they've done. So in the last 18 months, we've definitely seen a much greater strengthening and understanding of the contribution that customer service is playing, not just in terms of the contact centre, but much more wider in terms of those day-to-day relationships and experiences. And actually, what a big difference that customer service facing staff make to the well-being of people, the quality of life, how they enhance trust as well, and ultimately drive business performance. So in some ways, the pandemic has been a particularly important, I think, focus on why service is so important. What we've also seen, however, is this massive polarisation in terms of customers between those that can afford to pay for better service and, frankly, those that cannot. And that's particularly relevant in this sector. I think it's also true to say in the latest UK CSI that organisations have got better at dealing with issues, so the complaint or the service recovery is much better, but they certainly haven't got better at stopping those issues. And that's across every industry sector. So we've seen the highest level of complaints ever since I've been doing the index since 2009. So there's something really in there about making sure that we're getting it right first time and stopping those issues from happening in the first place. The other thing I think as well that COVID has shown us is the heightened importance of flexibility, small steps of innovation, but genuinely proactive engagement with customers. Those organisations that actually sought out communication, actually had much better honest and transparent conversations, I think have fared much better throughout the whole of the period. So I also think that what we've seen, and many of you will report this, is that customers are feeling much more vulnerable, and therefore this need for greater reassurance, knowledge and support. Now, that's not parental, that's more of about, well, signpost me to the best way that I can actually resolve this. Give me better information. So the communications aspect of all of this has definitely become more important. And what I, for one, would be suggesting is, as we were hoping to move out of the first stage of crisis into a much more this is business as usual, i.e. dealing with COVID, really trying to think about the things that have gone well during this period, the things that maybe we don't want to keep doing, and the things that we want to try and keep driving in the future. I'm doing trigger happy now. I'll take you back one slide. There we go. So this is hopefully a bit of a summary of what are we seeing since that's come out of this crisis. So I've talked about greater polarisation. I've talked about the amazing resilience of our staff. But let's also be honest, people are tired now. And actually how we continue to support their resilience and their sustainability is a really big issue. Doing the right thing has never been more important. From a customer viewpoint, there's a much greater degree of transparency and actually desire for authenticity and honest conversations. So again, those organisations have done the right thing. That doesn't mean doing everything the customer wants, by the way, but being really clear about what is needed have fared well in this. Hybrid working, I'm sure this will come up as a conversation, and we are just really trying to work our way through that at the moment. Around 20% of people are desperate to be in the office all the time. Around 60% actually want hybrid, and actually about a further 20% never want to come into an office setting again. Now, in this sector, you've got people that aren't anywhere near an office. They're out in the field. So how you balance the different requirements of your staff and your colleagues in terms of being seen to be fair is really important. So listening to the business needs, but also listening to colleagues' needs. And that's been a high piece, and probably outside of sectors, one of the main things culturally that's keeping many CEOs awake at night. You've already mentioned this, Lucy, right at the beginning about the combined issues and impacts of Brexit and COVID, so supply shortages. We've also got a massive run in terms of resourcing. Every organisation I'm talking to at the moment is really struggling to recruit and retain people. So thinking again, balancing that back to hybrid working and creating a much more flexible, and maybe it's not about hybrid, maybe it's much more about flexible ways of working that actually we should be focusing on as we go forward. Because this competition for talent is certainly hotted up. ESG, I think ESG was around way before the pandemic, but certainly come far more to the fore. So there's growing attention, and there's an expectation from customers that actually, as organisations, we're taking this really seriously now. And you're helping me to be able to do the right thing as well. So there's something like 50% in our green research, which we undertook at the early part of this year, of customers were saying that actually now it was one of the key decision makers, amongst others, but a key decision maker as to whether they would buy or purchase something from an organisation. And actually the other side of this is about choosing more wisely as well. So the whole green agenda is definitely accelerated. But that's a huge opportunity for the sector too, because there's also about this wider social purpose, which is why it's not just about the sustainability. There's the whole impact of the social purpose of the sector that I think actually provides a great opportunity to bring the community back together. And you can see on my slide here, I've talked about deurbanisation. With less people commuting, and people may still wish to go to an office, or they may still wish to commute to work, but maybe not the distance that they were before. So there's something really interesting about this sector being at the heart of the local community, and customers are now much more interested in their local community. So that's a really good opportunity, I might suggest, that we could be really driving forward in terms of the importance of that. I think the other thing as well is around data. And, we've seen huge advancements in terms of AI and data. And my only view on this really is that in terms of digital versus human, it's not versus, it's not either or, it's this brilliant combination. And making sure we really understand the customer journey and which bits of it are purely transactional and therefore digital plays a huge and important part, and which bits require much more human interaction. And then obviously over the data piece and trust, the more that we have appropriate data, the more we can personalise the service experience. And personalisation is going to become a big thing. So if I don't trust this organisation, I won't give them my data. If they don't give us the data, then we can't personalise that experience. So these two things are really important and really carefully linked to each other. So I'm often asked about, particularly in this sector, what's important? Well, the reality is it's not dissimilar to other sectors. So there's a whole piece around the actual, what I call functional experience that we've got to get right. So was the experience I expected? Was the quality there? Was the reliability there? Was I kept informed? All very functional things, but really important. So getting it right first time. The effectiveness, the efficiency, the ease of doing business with that organisation. Another key area is around the whole complaint handling, not just in terms of necessarily the outcome, but how did you make me feel through that process? And obviously that's a really big challenge, because I know, given the challenges that we're facing in terms of trades at the moment, managing that requires much more investment in terms of the communication and helping the customer through that process. And then on the right-hand side, these are the more emotional aspects, the softer elements, and they are really important. I've mentioned trust already, but, organisations that have higher levels of customer satisfaction, 9s and 10s out of 10, will have a 50% higher trust rating. So customer satisfaction actually has a huge opportunity to really drive trust in that organisation. And, that's also about how reassured I feel. And do I believe the customer ethos that this organisation enables me to interact in a way that I choose it? So that's through choice of channels, really, and giving me choice. Now, if you design your channels effectively, then people will tend to migrate to the channel that works for them, and actually they will do more digitally, particularly the transactional pieces. So you've got to think about the design, as I've already said, and actually what aspects of that service journey are best done through which routes. And then ethics, the reputation of this organisation. And I know the sector's had a pretty challenging few years. But, this is really important about being open and honest and transparent. And my experience of the sector is that I'm really seeing that, which is a great, great outcome. But doing the right thing has become more and more important. And then, I mentioned this about stated importance. So these are the sorts of things, which is what the question was, about what's important to customers. And as you can see here, the service experience, the competence of staff, doing what you say. And they are really, really important. The actual, if you like, repairs, etc. They do matter. And actually delivering that in a timely fashion does matter. However, the things that really correlate to the customer experience are much more of the softer areas. So actually, I did believe them. They made me feel reassured. They met my expectations. They managed that communication. So what we're looking at is both the actual service delivery, but also how that is done, I guess. Now, in the latest UK CSI, as many of you will know, you can see the green line across the top is the average of the UK CSI, so that's at 77.4. And then public service local is at 73. And let's be honest with you, the housing sector has had a really challenging period. So that is currently at 68.8. And there'll be a whole number of reasons for that. But one of the key things actually is being able to get it right first time. So as you can see on this, getting the basics right. So that decreased in the last 12 months by over 5 percentage points to 71.7. So there's a real focus on being able to try and execute that and deliver that well. Making it easy to contact the organisation in a way that I choose. I've talked a lot already about combining the balance between digital and human and being responsive in terms of customers' needs. And I'm really happy to pick up some of these questions as well, Lucy, so really happy to do that. Prioritising the needs of vulnerable customers. As customers, we want to make sure that those people that perhaps are in greatest need actually are looked after. So there's a big sense of that, about being very clear about what we're doing. And managing, as we've already said, the logistics and reliance of the supply chain. So that's much more about partnerships. Have we got the right partnerships in place? Are we actually recruiting our partners and our trades on the basis of the similar values of the organisation? And are we trying to build longer term relationships, which are really, really critical as we move forward? Insight and involving customers, again, a huge amount about the customer voice that's actually happened in the sector. And I think that is really, really important. And that ongoing engagement, that ongoing understanding and checking how things are. And reflecting in our own employee base, the diversity of our own customers too. So, really being able to have that voice in the right place. So, as we've said, building transparency, addressing the needs of vulnerable customers, and integrating digital and human customer experiences are the key things that really help to drive trust in an organisation. And trust is going to be really important as we go forward. Now, I'm getting close to the end, and those of you that know me know that I can talk for Britain on this, and I promise you I won't. But the three things I'd always try to encourage us to think about, and it's pretty challenging at the moment, isn't it? A lot of our staff are pretty tired, and it's been a really difficult period. But helping us to really focus on our purpose, what we stand for, why we are here, what makes us unique, and really communicating that well internally with our colleagues, but also with our customers, and getting them to really understand that. Relevance is a really important word. It makes us uncomfortable at times, but really asking ourselves who would miss us, because that helps us to prioritise our activity. Because at the moment, we're all probably feeling a bit overwhelmed. So being really clear against our purpose, what are the key things that we have to deliver? Where's the focus in the business? And then impact. A lot of the time, organisations measure activity. We measure the information that we have. And I'd really encourage us to think much more longer term and think, what's the impact that we're looking to create? What's the legacy that we were leaving? And if we can help everybody in the organisation to feel connected to those three things, then that will really drive a big difference inside of keeping employees on board, as we were saying, feeling connected to the business, and our customers feeling connected. And then my final slide is, and I'm often asked this when we look outside of sector, and I look at the top 10 of the UK CSI, what are the things that drive brilliant organisations? And these are those really, and doing it consistently well. So the leadership commitment to the customer service agenda, taking insight rather than research, and really trying to drill down and understand what our customers want as part of that customer journey, and understanding which parts of the customer journey are best served digitally and which parts are human. Consistency is important. It's no good just doing this once or twice, or having a handful of people that are good inside the organisation, really driving a consistent approach towards the service experience. Employee engagement, absolutely. There's a huge link. For every 1% increase in employee engagement, you get a 0.41 increase in customer sat. Dealing with problems head on, so that they don't fester, and having really upfront conversations about that. Measuring things that actually the customer cares about, not just because we have good data on it. It's important that we measure complaints, but it's not the only thing. And actually thinking about the sentiment and the trust and all of those things are as equally as important. And constantly looking for small innovation. We don't have to be changing the world, just constantly looking at how we can improve each part of those processes or steps. And if we can really focus on that, then that will really stand us in good stead. And then overall, as I've said already, really strong communication, right from the top of the organisation all the way through, and enabling people to feel that they have some sense of control and understanding. So those are my top tips. I hope that is helpful, and I'm really happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Jo. That was really insightful. I'm sure a lot of our audience will be struck by that slide that shows satisfaction in the housing sector compared to other sectors. And yeah, that's something that I'm sure we'll discuss during the Q&A. Just a reminder, everyone, please keep your questions coming in. We've got a few in already. I'm going to pass over now to Jackie. I think she is here. Can you hear us, Jackie?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, take it away, Jackie.
Okay, hopefully you can see my slides, because unfortunately I can't see them, so I'm going to have to rely on a bit of technical help to move them along. So I'm Jackie Perry, work for Muir Group, and I've been asked, I want to talk to you really about our approach over the last 18 months, what we've learned and how we're changing. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so just very quickly, a few words about Muir Group. So we own over 5,500 properties, so relatively small, but cover quite a substantially wide geography. So from up in the north around Blackpool, Burnley, over to Northallerton, cover the northwest, and then over to the east where we've got stock in Huntington, Northampton, Peterborough, and then right down to the south in Reading. So we're quite a wide geography. Got a diverse portfolio of housing solutions. And during this year, we launched our new corporate plan. It's underpinned by 4 objectives, of which one of them is our customers, so quite fitting, and also around our place, our people, and our business. So we can just move on to the next slide. Okay, so I want to start really by introducing you to Maureen. So she's been a bit of an inspiration to me over the last 18 months. And I think it really helps to show how we've approached our customer service, but also how we're rethinking and changing. So Maureen's in her 80s. She's been a resident of Muir Group for over 15 years. She lives alone in her flat and has a long history of suffering from mental health. And this is made worse when she experienced social isolation and loneliness. And prior to the pandemic, she'd actually become very active in her local community. She'd engaged in our Muir Living Brighter Days project, and everything was going really well. And then obviously March 2020 hit, and along with other people, she was advised to self-isolate. And this really was Maureen's biggest fear. She became very frightened, where she was aware that if her social network and support deteriorated, this could have a really severe impact on her well-being and her mental health. So she was really scared. And at this point, she spoke to our independent living officer at Muir Group. And And the next few slides will talk you through that approach and how we've changed. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of our approach to customer excellence, I think it really does build on some of the points Joe was making, but our organisation has a very open, honest and transparent, supportive culture. And I think this is something that's remained very strong during the last 18 months, whilst we've actually been remote. So I think that's really positive. And it's demonstrated by how we're driven by our 6 values, which set out what we say we will do. But more importantly for us, it's about how these values translate into the behaviours that we all do every day. And in the case of Maureen, the team absolutely put those values into action to make sure that she could access the services she needs, set up befriending, have wellbeing calls to alleviate that fear that she had. So we made a connection with her and she trusted us as part of that. We were committed throughout the last and continue to be in investing and empowering our people. So ensuring they've got the right tools and skills and resources, but they're motivated and engaged. And I think Joe mentioned about resilience and people being tired, and I think we absolutely see that. And as part of that, and to make sure our staff felt supported to continue to go that extra mile, we've delivered wellbeing sessions using a provider called Westfield Health, which has been around coaching our groups of staff and supporting their wellbeing on various sort of topics. And about getting a better understanding of our customers, personalising the services, listening and empowering them by keeping them engaged and informed. So we've talked, Joe mentioned about communication, absolutely, and I think that's communicating in a variety of ways to meet different people's needs and valuing that voice to help support improvements. So we know from our customers that they want it to be easy and effortless when they're accessing our services, to minimise that inefficiency gap that creates that dissatisfaction that we see, and whilst ensuring that we can make that connection with customers who've perhaps got more complex, more emotional problems that need that personal contact and empathy. We've done a lot of scrutiny and improvement in partnership with our customers, so making sure that customer voice was at the heart of everything, using the feedback from satisfaction surveys and complaints to make real-time actionable insight happen alongside our national residents group, who are our customer committee, to ensure that voice is heard and acted upon and to help us rethink and drive that change and improvement. And you know what, I sit here today and we're not perfect by any stretch, but we've made a start and we think we're on the right track and doing some of the right things for our customers, which is, we feel, was reflected in over 90% of our customers saying they were satisfied with the way we'd responded and approached the pandemic. But as I say, we're not perfect and there's a lot more for us to do. If you could do the next slide, please. So we are changing, and like many others over the last 18 months, we continue to see increased call volumes, call times and rising complaints, alongside a general decline in satisfaction. And so as our customers' expectation is changing and they want things to be easier and effortless as they can be, we've launched our #MeAll Customer Experience programme, which really sets out a clear vision and purpose for what we want to achieve about making that customer experience easier, smarter and better. And the last 18 months, we've modified that quite significantly to reflect changing priorities. And that's underpinned by the 5 objectives that you'll hopefully see on the screen around connecting people, delivering the right services, meeting expectations, having a supportive culture for both our staff and customers, and protecting our business. And we'll undergo this change and transformation over the next three years. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So the pandemic highlighted that for customers like Maureen, a great and successful customer experience is all about how you make someone feel and how valued they are. So as part of our #MeAll Customer Experience programme, we're listening, we're learning, and it's been a great opportunity to rethink that approach, because after all, happy customers are key to our business success. So this includes for us taking time as an organisation to re-engage with our customers, and we're starting a big conversation with them as our customers said this is something that they'd really value. So in March and February time, we're launching our big chat, which is where we're going to reconnect with our customers, rebuild that trust and confidence, particularly for us, what has been quite a long period where our visibility in our communities has been limited and not as much as we would normally have been. To gain that fresh insight into our customer expectations and reveal some new feedback for us to help us develop a customer promise that sets out what we will do for our customers, but also what we need our customers to do as part of that promise, so that we can realign and reconnect our services to meet the customer expectation and close that gap of dissatisfaction. And we're undergoing organisational-wide customer service training, so that's will take the form of coaching to ensure that staff have got the right tools, skills, and are empowered to be creative, be responsive, and proactive with the right guidance and support to deliver that. We're also trying to maximise the opportunities and benefits of hybrid working. So we're seeing increasing demands on our staff as customers expect faster, more efficient services, but recognise that by working differently, it offers us an opportunity to access our reliable remote teams are capable of working more flexibly to better meet our customer needs. We're also focusing, going right back to basics in some areas and doing some root cause analysis on our repair service. We've seen lots of contacts that could be avoidable and a need to drive up first-time resolution. So we're using root cause analysis to inform that, give us that actionable insight to drive those improvements and really focus on that customer journey and improving it. It's also been an opportunity for us to remodel some of our services like tenancy sustainment, where we've actually gained better insight into our customers' needs so that we can tailor that service to better address the more complex issues and personalise it to their needs. And I previously said about listening to that diverse customer voice, and that's one of the things that we're really focusing on, about using feedback in real time to drive those improvements and remove that gap of dissatisfaction whilst building that trust and respect. And our National Residents Group, their last annual report, really does summarise some of the work that we've done over the last 18 months in relation to that. And I think the key there is about doing a blend of quick wins and having that longer term sort of plan for service improvement as well, and having a good balance there. So if you can move on to the final slide. So you remember Maureen, well, she's doing really well, and with all the support and care that she's had from her independent living officers and the wider community. And if you do get a few minutes after today, please take a look at the ITV news story that she took part in, which really hones in on the impact that had on her and how she was helped through the different services and the customer experience that she received. But I think for us, the pandemic and Maureen's experience really reminded us that a successful customer experience is all about how you make somebody feel at that point in time and how valued they are. So as part of our programme, we're listening, we're learning, we're using that feedback to rethink our approach, to make sure that we can continue to maximise the opportunities that have come out of the last 18 months that have made us think about being more agile in our approach, thinking differently, challenging, but more importantly, sort of working together to be absolutely obsessive about ensuring our customers' service is the best it can be. After all, our customers deserve nothing less. And I think that sort of concludes my presentation.
All right, brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Jackie. That 90% figure is very impressive, so I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about how you managed to achieve that. Just a final reminder to keep putting your questions into the chat box. There's lots coming in now. And yeah, I'm just going to pass over now to our final speaker, Gary, and then we will get on to the Q&As. Gary, are you there?
That is got to be quote of 2020 and 2021, isn't it? I'm on mute. Thank you very much indeed, Lucy. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. So I'm really going to take you on kind of a whistle-stop tour of kind of our experience and certainly my experience within the housing sector and kind of the changes that we've really, really seen accelerate over probably the last 18 months or so. The first thing I'm going to touch on is actually why we do what we do, and really want to sort of take it back to the basics. This isn't just a job to many people that we speak to on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people joined organisations to make an impact on their local area, or they've seen the impact that social housing has had in such a positive way and wanted to continue or enhance that experience. And added to that, we see a lot of people stay within the industry because we've seen the positive impact on so many lives. And if we just think back to Jackie's story about Maureen, I think that kind of encapsulates it really, really well. So as I say, for me, it was coming back to really why do we do what we do within this particular sector. And so what I really want to do is I want to sort of touch on two areas of change, one from an association perspective, but also one from our customers' experience and our customer changes and mindsets. So what I'm going to touch on kind of first and foremost is, we've juggled, or as housing associations, we've juggled with the changes to social interaction. Face-to-face activity was absolutely at the fore for a lot of our RLOs that were out in the field. There's many outside factors that have impacted the social housing industry that have had such significant implications that go far, far beyond the effect of the pandemic. And then added to that is a lot of the kind of high importance objectives that are certainly mentioned and spoken about in many of the annual reports typically come at a significant cost to the organisation and subsequently to the tenant off the back of it. So those are some really, really big challenges that have really accelerated over the last year to 18 months. So let's shuffle along. Three key things. Now, first of all, the environmental impact. Number one is 97% of housing associations and social housing organisations listed environmental focus in their annual report. Now, this has, and Joe mentioned it a little bit earlier, this has been on the radar for a number of years, but 2020, 2021 absolutely accelerated these discussions, no questions. Challenges within the gas sector have also played an impact in those conversations. But let's not forget, as a society, and this is not limited to our customers, we're all talking about it more and more. And, COP26 was also taking place up in Glasgow. That further accelerated those conversations and definitely brought that as a topic of conversation. My second one is customer inquiries, and this is incoming. Now, every single organisation that I have spoken to, and I've seen some of the comments and Q&A coming through as well, have seen an increase in incoming calls. Now, that is a significant jump from 2019 and also the early part of 2020. I have not spoke to a single person that has seen a decline in that. And that takes so many different forms, whether it's overdue maintenance. Again, I think there was a question around that a little bit earlier. New maintenance. As an industry, we've not been able to work in a preventative format for, again, probably the first 6 to 9 months, if not a little bit longer than that. And then I'm not going to shy away from the conversation, but, cladding. This is still an ongoing topic of conversation for not just people in social housing, but actually in society and homeowners as well. So I think there's a huge part of the focus on that, and that's definitely been a big change for associations to work towards. And the third one is outside influence. Almost 70% of social housing and housing associations have reported external factors have negatively impacted their performance. Now, I could have written just the word costs on this slide, to be fair, but no matter if it's Brexit, the pandemic, issues around supply chain, HGV drivers, whatever the reason, all of these things have had a serious knock-on impact in the way housing associations, social housing contractors work. Now, we've also seen small companies and large run into difficulty, and this has ultimately an adverse effect on the industry as a whole. So I think, if we tie those three things as a collective together, there's some big changes that we've faced as an organization or an organization and an industry. So what I'm now going to do is almost kind of shuffle this across to tenant side and actually look at the change of the importance to society and not just tenants. Everybody has been aware of the challenges in supply and demand of hardware, Brexit, the Suez Canal, HGV driver challenges, through to the basic availability of raw materials. 2020 and 2021, homes also became a safe place for so many people. Let's take Maureen as a great example. And that's not just in social housing. We all spent a large amount of time inside, even more so in flats and apartments. And we spent more time entertaining when we were allowed to, instead of going out socially. This was and remains nationally the biggest asset. And I use that as it's our home and our space, not as if it was just owned. Now, you add that to, and Joe mentioned kind of flexibility a little bit earlier, we have had total flexibility, driven mainly by working cultures. We all became more aware of mental health across the country. And actually, I'm going to go far beyond that, across the globe. Our flexibility goes way beyond working culture from the way we shop. We now shop more online than we ever did before, speeding up a trend that was already happening. Click and collect has meant we don't have to do the weekly shop for an hour around Tesco, Aldi, Waitrose, or wherever we shop. Returns policies are more flexible than ever before. Opening hours changed in a lot of places with longer hours, and we flipped our lifestyle from a fairly structured and rigid lifestyle into one of total flexibility. Okay, so let's talk about the flexibility areas. First of all, time. This became probably our most valuable asset to us as a society, and that isn't just limited to us as individuals. It's also companies and organizations. Time became inherently more valuable from either a cost base or also what we wanted to do with it. Loop that in. Sorry, shuffling across. We've seen an entire nation move to new ways of connecting. And I'm going to take my own situation here. I would never have had a video call every Sunday for an entire year with my extended family, but we did. My grandma now texts me every day, and my uncle in the US emails me a weekly update for what's going on within my family. Now, the point I'm making here is everyone is communicating in a different way to how we did. It becomes more regular. And if we don't get that, you're almost asking a question, why am I not receiving that? But not everybody uses the same method. And we find out what works for us as consumers. So everybody kind of treats that differently. And I think it's just sped up that trend initially. And then last of all, I think I probably speak for everybody here. The problem isn't the problem. It's actually how you deal with the problem is far more impactful from a customer perspective. And no matter whether you're dealing with a retail outlet or whether you're dealing with a housing association, that is far more impactful as from a consumer perspective than anything else. So really, in summary, my three key points that I would send everybody away with is society is completely understanding of challenges. We are hyper aware of what is going on across the globe and certainly across the UK. Being proactive is far more effective than reacting to a challenge, an issue, or a problem. And really, there's only one thing that covers every area that myself, Joe, and Jackie have spoken about. And Jackie mentioned one of the programs that they're rolling out in kind of Feb-March time in next year, which is communication. That is the one single biggest thing that comes across as impactful to every single individual and every single organisation out there as a society. So with that, hopefully I've shared some key insights to the conversations we're having. Hopefully that puts people into a position where you're not on your own, and there's other organisations with the same struggles and challenges out there. But also bringing that into, actually, if we take society as a whole, how has that changed? And how is that going to help us, engage and deliver a better customer experience moving forward? So with that, I will say thank you very much, and looking forward to answering some of the questions that have come through through the chat. So thank you.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Gary. We've got about 15 minutes left. There's quite a lot of questions in the chat. I'm keen to get through as many as possible. So I'm just going to dive right in. So the first question that I'm going to put to you is from Alison Greenhow, and it's on an issue that quite a few of our panelists have spoken about, which is kind of repair backlogs, supply chain shortages, and how that's impacting customer service. So Alison's question is, repair backlogs are a huge issue for housing providers, given the issues faced over the past 18 months. Is there something the regulator or the Institute of Customer Service could do to work collectively with RPs to help set expectations? I'm really confident all RPs are doing everything they can to recover quickly and provide the best possible service. So Joe, I'll put that question to you first. What can be done to kind of collectively work with RPs on this issue?
Totally. And can I just say, I absolutely recognise what Alison is saying. And the Institute, actually, and I'm quite happy to pick it up separately offline, is working quite hard with the regulator, not just on this issue, but also more broadly to make sure that we're measuring the right things. So really happy to have a conversation offline. But I also think it's about, seeing the whole customer experience in the round. So this is just one element of it. And it's also about all the steps that people are putting in place. We've already had, quite a lot discussed this morning about some of these things are outside of housing sector's control. Shortages of trades, shortages of the sorts of issues. I think heightening, and Gary talked about about this a lot, about the communication of that. But it's not so much about the outcome, it's what we're trying to do about it, and really good and effective communication through that line. But I'm really happy to have a conversation with anyone, because I do think part of the issue here is making sure that we're measuring in the widest context, not just what the elements of it. It is actually, trust levels. It is communication more broadly. It is all of those things that really kind of, how easy the organisation is to do business with, that actually has that impact, not just the complaint side too.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. And I think that's a really good point, is that some issues are sometimes out of the kind of landlord's control, and how important it is to just communicate those issues with their tenants if there is going to be delays. Gary, do you have any kind of practical tips on how housing associations can kind of communicate that effectively?
Yes, I certainly can help with that. I think it's probably better for maybe a conversation as to understanding what the root cause to that is. Repair backlogs, from my conversations I've been having, have basically come around because we stopped doing a lot of this maintenance over a period of time, and subsequently after that, it's compounded because people's lives are more flexible. So no access rates is a great example, is something that I talked to a lot of companies about, and not being aware of appointments, or lifestyles changing, or that day looks a little bit different because something happens. Great example was yesterday morning. I think people woke up yesterday morning with some of the snow on the tracks and thought, not today, I'm not going into the office. So people's lives changed, and the flexibility that we have now. So I think it's just a combination. It'll probably be a really good conversation to have as a one-to-one. But lots of tips, lots of hints. It's just understanding customers and the reason why that maintenance doesn't happen.
Okay, great. And Jackie, is this a problem that you're experiencing at Muir, and how are you kind of communicating to your residents issues in terms of backlogs or like lack of resources, that kind of thing.
So yeah, it's something that we're seeing and experiencing, and I think the way we've approached it is to be open about that and upfront. So making customers aware when they're first reporting that repair, what the situation is in terms of resetting some of the length of time people will have to wait to get the repair done, trying to manage that expectation, but also recognising that it can be quite a challenge for the staff that have to deal with that every day. When unfortunately they can't give that customer exactly what they want at that point in time. So making sure that the staff have been supported has been a real key element of that, to make sure that they can continue to support our customers, manage those expectations and be upfront about the situation. I think just in terms of the sector as a whole, there's most probably a collective message that we could give about that situation in terms of supply chains and delays, because it actually isn't just affecting one provider, it's affecting us all. So there's most probably a collective story that we need to get out there in terms of that bigger communications piece to customers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, transparency is key. I guess that is the main takeaway from that. Another question I want to put to you, so this is from... Oh, sorry was someone jumping in there?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
can I come in on that point around inappropriate behaviour? Because I can see that that's, from customers who are getting more frustrated and are getting perhaps more hostile as well. And just to let people know, and they can go and have a look on the website for this, we have a campaign at the moment that's called Service with Respect, which is absolutely on this, about trying to do three things really, but help organisations to help their staff in terms of dealing with some of this. We're actually calling for a change in the law to protect customer service facing people, and also reminding customers that we've all got a part to play. So I know it's a separate point, but I've seen this quite a lot in a rise in abusive behaviour, and if anyone needs anything on that, there's just go and have a look at our website. So it's just a bit of a shout out.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Joe. That's a really good point. I'm sure plenty of people will want to take a look at that. Yeah, a kind of different subject I want to ask you about. So this question from Mike Stone: how do we ensure that sustainability does not impact the vulnerable society here in the UK and worldwide, as the cheapest forms of energy are unfortunately not the greenest? How do we ensure social housing sector is not used as an experiment? And I think, I would kind of like to add to that the social housing sector here is in a lot of ways at the forefront of retrofitting and the move to net zero, which is a great thing for many reasons. But as kind of pointed out in the question, there are risks to that, and we are going into people's homes and kind of fundamentally changing how they live. And I think, as I said in my intro, customer service is key to that, and communicating with tenants is key to that. So what should housing associations be doing now to kind of communicate what's going to happen and building that trust and relationship? And I'm going to put that question to you first, Gary, because I know you mentioned the environment a bit in your presentation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it covers probably a number of different areas. So in terms of ensuring the social housing sector is not used as an experiment, I think we probably need to come back to almost back a step and not isolate the social housing sector and actually talk society. This is a conversation that is on everybody's lips, and regardless of whether you're in social housing or not, it impacts us all. Right. So I think there's a conversation there. Now, I think where the question is probably leading to in terms of the experimental side is maybe the cost base. And if I'm honest, I don't have the golden ticket. I'd love to have the golden ticket to that. I think everybody probably would. But it's a conversation that needs to be had as a broad society rather than just kind of segmented into that particular individual. This is not isolated to us, and let's look at Ofgem, Ofwat, and so forth. I don't think we all knew the implications or the impact of putting price restrictions on of what people could buy or sell gas for. And subsequently, that's had a real significant impact. So, as I say, I'm not sure it's just specifically isolated to the housing sector. I think this is a more society change and maybe a broader conversation there.
Okay, yeah, great. That's a great point. Joe, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think the sector's doing enough right now to communicate these issues, and any advice on what they should be doing here?
I think Gary is completely right, and this is a huge issue across every industry sector. You know, there are a number of things which we talked about right at the beginning, which are playing out. And I guess for me, there's going to be a responsibility in terms of government more broadly, in terms of funding for some of these schemes, which obviously has to come to the light a bit further. There's also a requirement for energy providers to think about that and maybe being a bit more flexible in some of the plans that we've actually got. There's a requirement in terms of how we're building our properties. You know, this is one of the kind of the big things that we all collectively need to come together on. And, you know, greater partnerships, greater opportunities to be more creative have got to be part of that, as well as, you know, seeking out proper funding. And this is an issue in every industry sector. And it's not going to go away. So this is going to require all of us, I guess, to step up and play our part. I think what is good, which should give us some heart, is there's a growing awareness from a customer viewpoint that this is important. But let's not get away from the point that was very much made in terms of those that can afford to do this and those that can't. And, you know, we are going to have to address that, you know, head on. And it's going to be some interesting questions. We keep, you know, I'm asking some of our members that may be in the commercial world around, you know, we may have to resort in differentiated pricing between those that can afford to pay for something and those that can't. You know, so these are some big questions for society, for government, and for us in terms of how we raise those conversations, and some choices that we're going to have to make. And involving our customer base in that, in the dialogue and the conversation about saying, you know, I can do this, but I can't do this. What do we feel about this? Or is there another way of working around that? Is going to require us all to be doing that. And moving away from I tell, you do. This is a collective issue. But, you know, a huge one too.
Yeah, definitely. I am conscious that we are just about to run out of time, so I might try and squeeze one final question into you, Jackie. This is a question from Joanna Beeson, and it's, how do you encourage a wide range of people to give customer experience feedback?
Okay, so some of I think it's the approach we've taken is giving a variety of different ways. So not just focusing on one way of doing it, but offering people lots of different options, making it as flexible as possible so that they can engage for as long as they want or as little as they want to reflect their sort of lifestyle and time. So we have things like an online Facebook community where people can make comments on certain things and policies or services that we might be changing, and that's the sort of quick touch dive in. And then we have our more formal sort of customer committee, which requires a lot more commitment, through to sort of surveys that can take a few minutes. So offering as wide variety of opportunities as you can. But just being clear, I think for me, sometimes we try and encourage getting as much feedback as possible, when really we need to think about how we're targeting it and what we're using it for and what the purpose is. Because sometimes I think where we've gone wrong is we've not been very clear with our customers, whether we're just giving them, whether we're communicating with them to give them information, or whether we're communicating to consult with them on something. Or actually we want them to co-design something, we want them to be empowered and co-design something with us. And I think because we're not always clear, we sometimes don't actually maximise the opportunity to get a diverse group of people involved and give us wider scope as possible. So I think it's about giving as many options as you can, giving people choice about when and how they engage, and you get that feedback from them. And just remember that it doesn't always have to be formal. So to me, I always think our staff are our biggest asset, and lots of our frontline staff have conversations with our customers every day. And that to me is feedback that they often get, and we need to make sure we capture that, because that's very rich, and actually it's very broad and wide, and can give you the most insightful information that you'll get beyond a survey, specific questions and so on.
Just to add. Sorry, Lucy,
Yeah,
just to add a comment to that as well. I think the most important thing about feedback is how you deal with it. And showing, your tenants, your customers, exactly what you do with their feedback. So there's a broad part of that. But if you do receive negative feedback, it's acting upon it in a very, very swift and timely fashion is the most valuable element to it. And go back to my slide is problem's not a problem. It's how you deal with it that is the most impactful thing. So using that feedback on an individual one-by-one basis as well as a whole. So I think those two things are really, really valuable.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that, Gary. So we have come to the end of our time. Thank you so much to our three panelists for all the insightful comments. Sorry we didn't get through all the questions, but I'm sure our panelists will be happy to kind of speak to you offline about any questions that you have. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to our sponsors Locals for making this event happen, and hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.